Okay, we're going to do 15 minutes of live coding on K2, and specifically I'm working on a project called Chartdensity because I believe charts need to be very dense. We need to have a lot of information. When we talk about single pane of glass, I was just watching one of the reInvent talks about RDS monitoring and using Performance Insights. And by the way, I think Performance Insights is an awesome tool. But you think about it, that's not a single pane of glass, is it? That's Performance Insights, and most companies, now are trying to use things like Grafana and Mimir and Loki and all this kind of stuff. Trying to build a cloud agnostic system. And in fact, on the last job I was on, technically the developers and administrators wouldn't even have access to the production AWS environment. It's all done through pipelines, so they're not going to have access to Performance Insights. So, and I think a lot of the charting and graphing that's available is kind of limited to technology, and there should be more open systems for all kinds of information, and we should be able to track, chart, graph, and alert on that information more easily. So that's kind of some of the ideas behind Chartdensity. But the reality is I just need a real project that pushes the development of everything else I do along, and this is my area of interest. So this is the project I'm working on. So K2 is this framework which is available for you to use, and it's got lots of cool stuff in, but of course I am tearing it apart and rebuilding it all the time. It's not at all stable. But we're hoping that someday it is, and hoping that it's really awesome, and hoping that some people like to do development the way I do development. It's not for everybody. This system isn't going to be for everybody, but for me as a solo developer to be able to develop a number of products simultaneously, and to have kind of a backend or framework that I can extend and use and apply to all those projects to continue to make things hopefully easier and easier and easier. I need to have something kind of under my control. So K2 comes with a bunch of tools, and one of those tools is called Statzilla. Now, things have been continuing to roll into this main K2 folder as I shift things around, and I can't say that Statzilla won't eventually be up here in K2, and it'll just be called K2 Stats. But right now it's Statzilla, and we want to build an API on it. Now, what I want Chartdensity to have an API that you can call to add stats to your data sets. And data sets are essentially just a front end for the stats in Statzilla. And I started to put the API here, but this wasn't really the location for it. So then I started thinking about putting it in Statzilla, and I thought, everything's kind of moving to K2, and K2 is really the interface. So what we want an interface called K2 API. And I started this before and renamed them to private because my my Git excludes things that say private. So we're going to go ahead and start building the API. I've already built the test API up here. There's already a call to basically do this metric request. So we're going to kind of basically build the same thing for Statzilla or for K2 that looks at Statzilla, and then Chartdensity API will just be basically you're going to call the same function, but you're going to just put a different path on it and a different name. So that's kind of, and you can change the variables you use. Abstractions, right? It's all abstractions. So what I need to do first is let's go ahead and get this stuff in order. So we're actually going to add these files to K2 for real. So let's just do a rename, and we're going to get rid of private on all these files. Do I like K2 API? Sure, we like K2 API. Uh-oh, that didn't rename. Why is that not working? Oh, because I got it open. This is a Sublime thing. Close tabs to write. Okay. That's just a quirky Sublime text thing. Okay, it's still not working. How about this? Open containing folder, close this, and how about we just... Oh, there's already a file named that. Well, that's... I'm going to go look and see what that is. Okay, let me look and see what I've done. I already have an API. Okay. Yeah. So this is more like K2 API helper functions, but they do need to be, okay. Okay, so, yeah. Okay, get request, okay, so we're just gonna delete that file. And the schema, we don't need that. But we may already have this table, so we're going to, just to make sure in our K2 schema, we're just gonna put that up there and drop that just in case it exists anywhere. Okay, the package body, get token from request. I think I already have get user ID from request. I think I've got all this. Get new API token, API get request. That is just kind of a test code. Yeah, okay, we're just gonna leave that. And we have K2 API. There we go. Okay, so I think check install. So we are not installing K2 API on the install. We need to do that. So this actually installs the API. Now, I have a config variable called enable ords, and if that's true, then it will do an ords enable schema. I'm cool with that. If ords is not enabled, then it will do a false. Okay, I'm okay with that. Then we have a define module. We're going to do /API. Now, I didn't put the version number in here because I wanted it to be as simple as possible, and then I figured I'd test adding the version later. But I think what we need to do is define API / version 1 as and our module name needs to be, I think, version 1. And our base path API version 1. And that's got to match. And so this is a status. This is just our API status check. And what we want to do is define a handler status. It's a get type PL SQL, and we're calling K2 API foo, which what we should really be doing is calling our status check code. So we'll call this status check, and I think we want version 1 on it because module name needs to be version 1. Pattern status. So we're mapping everything under version 1, and then, but if you call status, so we would potentially, if we had a version 2, we would have a different module, we'd map to v2, we'd have a different template called status, it would map to v2, and then, we'd have a v2 here, if that happened to change. If it doesn't change, that's interesting. Do we have to duplicate this, or we might could just, yeah, we just have a v2, but we'd call v1 if it didn't change. Okay, I think that'll work. So status check v1. So I'm gonna go back down here and look at foo, because that's what we had. And we're gonna go ahead and bring that up. And I do have a procedure status. I think I've already done this. Let me see if that's the same basic thing. Yes, it is. Okay, it's yeah, we were getting the user ID from request for that, but that's not what we want. We just want status. So actually all we need to do is change this to status v1, check our header, status v1, and then we'll go back to API and we'll just change that to status v1. Okay, so in theory, this is going to I just have this ref cursor stuff here because I need to remember this. That's one of the problems, you know, I encounter daily. As I see something like this, I'm like, oh, I need to remember that you can just like do this JSON write L cursor for a ref cursor, and it does the JSON. But if you're not using it every day, you will forget that, and I'll forget how to do it, and I'll forget where it was. So I'm always looking for better systems. I've got some systems I'm not going to get into, but for now I'm just leaving that there because I'll try to remember it, and then maybe we'll put it in a README, or I've got other ways. Okay, so this just helps us. We can check the log file and see if this thing even gets called. It's going to do an open object. It's going to write status okay, and then, you know, I think, oh yeah, you can't. So you can't put the status code here because it's like a bind variable. So I'm wondering if there's a way to do this where I can set the status code, but that doesn't work. And so what you have to do is you put that in the wrapper. So for example, up here, when we actually create the layer on top of that, that's going to be looking like this, and then we can set our status in here. And I think string out works. I saw that somewhere, copied it, but I don't know if there's any other variables I could use instead there. So that's basically how you set your status. It's going to be in the handler, and we're not doing that. We're going to have our so the idea is the way we build our API is we have APIs into, you know, whatever service it is, like contact. And so like add contact, there'll be a function that basically you build a handler that calls that function. And that way we can do the reason I want to do that is I want to be able to get access to the header and do things like verify the bearer token. One of the things that I've done on a project before is you basically, the bearer token ends up being a JWT, a JavaScript web token, or JSON web token, which has got information. So it's like you take a JSON object and you have some set information plus data in it, and then you assign it, and you get a string back that represents that object signed and all this stuff. It's not encrypted, but what you can further do is you can further encrypt the object, or you could encrypt the contents of the data and leave the other stuff in the open, so that anybody can at least read part of it, but they can't read the encrypted part. And then you can pass that around, and you can actually pass credentials and things like that around. You can know where it came from, who it was, and all that. Of course, all your services that are doing this, even if they're separate services, need to share that that key to unencrypt the encrypted contents. But I've passed that around as a bearer token before. So okay, what is up next? Let's go back down to Statzilla, and so where do we want to put the API? Do we want to put all of the API? This is going to get really big if we put all the API in here. So I'm thinking, since there's, if I was going to do an API for contact, I'd probably do K2 contact API and have it right there. So I think we're just going to do a new file. And I like to save my file right away and give it the name. So it's going to be K2 stat, and then we'll just call it stat API dot pkg header. No, sorry, pkg header dot SQL, and then we're going to do K2 stat API pkgb.sql, and what we're going to do is steal from Statzilla, and this is going to get taken away because we don't want to use it there. We want it here. We're coming up on 15 minutes, and that's all I'm going to do. Hopefully I'll get better at this and get more ground We're going to change the name of that, of course, to K2 Stat API. Hey, driveway alarm. Sometimes it works. All right. So that's all I got. We're going to end the video here, and thanks for watching.